Hello friends, welcome to the Noclip podcast. Danny here, and this week I am delighted to be joined by Teddy and Kenny Lee from Cellar Door Games, creators of so many games. Rogue Legacy obviously comes to mind with you guys, but obviously stuff like Full Metal Furies, all the way back to your awesome Flash games like Don't Shit Your Pants. We're going to talk about the whole thing today on the podcast. Gentlemen, thank you so much for making the time. First of all, Kenny, give me an MTV cribs of your bedroom here for the folks watching the video version. What do you got going on?
There's a bed and there's a computer with two monitors. I actually got a new bed recently. I got one of those adjustable beds that can raise and lower.
Oh my! Why do you need? What's an adjustable?
I've upgraded it.
How high does an adjustable bed go? Like 4 feet or like 2 feet?
Oh no! It raises the back, so like you can, like if you were like browsing the internet or something, you just lift up and you don't need to like have some pillows on your back or something. It's awesome. It's pretty sweet.
I love it. Teddy, you also have a fairly minimal bedroom setup. I appreciate it. I have a very cluttered room here, so I'm digging the minimalist sort of thing you got going on there.
I have a piece of cardboard.
Yeah, what's
the only flare?
Yeah,
what's the cardboard for?
If prints are pressed against the wall, they'll sometimes leave like a stain or something.
There you go.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So you guys are in Toronto, right?
Yep, that's right.
So how have you been, I guess, working from home? How has this whole thing been going? We've been covering the guys at Supergiant who have been working on an early access game for a couple of years, and they have definitely suffered a bit with the work from home situation. How has it been for you guys? Because it's quite difficult to switch off work, right? Especially when you're in early access.
Yeah, it's I think for us it wasn't so bad because prior to Rogue Legacy 2, we were actually, when we made FMF, we were all remote work anyway.
Cool.
And then so there was actually a change when we went to Rogue Legacy 2 into an office setting with people coming in, and now it's just kind of back to what it used to be.
Right.
So it's a natural progression for us. Still very unhealthy.
How long have you been working on Rogue Legacy 2 then? How long was that like office setup going?
I'd say about a year and a half, and then because of the outbreak, the last 6 months have been from home.
Right. So I'm really interested. We don't get many sibling teams in game dev. Taran Adams and his brother comes to mind, and then you guys are the only ones I can really think of. How does the delineation of work between you guys? Are you both programming? Are you both doing art? Are you both involved in design? Like where do your sort of strengths and weaknesses lie between the two of you guys?
Well, we have a very, very different, like very specific set of skills. So I'm a programmer. I also handle all of the business stuff, or most of the business stuff. We actually get some other people to help us out. And Teddy is everything design.
Awesome.
So yeah, he's a lifer game designer.
Yeah, but I also do really bad scripts, which then Kenny has to go over.
Yeah, I mean, he tries to dabble in the stuff that I do, with like AI scripts and stuff like that. But then it does require some like cleanup and stuff. You also do like level design, right? Yeah, all design stuff.
Awesome. Does that delineation of work sort of help then, where there's a very clear church and state where someone's responsibilities are?
Well, no, I definitely think Kenny also submits substantially to the design side, right? Like we're always talking about all the final things and everything, right? About where we want to go with these games. But yeah, I think it helps somewhat. I don't know.
Yeah, well, it helps in the sense that if there ever is, like, for example, if I do have some creative ideas and I pitch them to Teddy, Teddy gets final say. Right? So as long as the delineation is there, then we know if there is ever a conflict, how to get sorted, because there is a person who has like full control and full jurisdiction over that department or part of development.
Right, and then where does art come into play? Because obviously your game's very striking. I cannot wait to talk to you about the art in Rogue Legacy 2 because the animation is absolutely incredible.
Thank you.
Where does that come down then? Is that external or do one of you guys handle that?
We actually started working with Matt Hamill, who's another guy from Toronto, and he was one of the 3 founders of Asteroid Base.
Yeah, so they made a game called Lovers in a Dangerous Space-Time.
Yeah.
And we really liked his work, and so we were like, well, we were sort of transitioning from our previous technology to Unity to make Rogue Legacy 2, so we were like, well, you've got a lot of Unity experience, how would you like working with us on Rogue Legacy 2? And he surprised everybody with what he came up with.
He's awesome. He's amazing. Yeah,
it's super striking. I went back to play Rogue Legacy 1 just to get that feel, because I've had something similar this week with Spelunky 2, because you play Spelunky 2 and I'm like, oh, this feels a lot like, and then you go back and play Spelunky 1, you're like, oh my god, these things are like
totally I played Rogue Legacy 1 recently. I haven't touched it in I think 2-3 years.
Right.
And I mean, I shouldn't say this about our own games, but I was a little embarrassed at, and that's no knock to the art that was done in the previous game, which was Labyrinth. Like, he did a fantastic job, but it was like one guy, and we dropped everything on him, and it is. I was surprised myself at sort of how much the art style had evolved.
And Glamour's not with us today. He's the actual guy who does the animating and makes it all.
He's still with us, so hopefully he's not mad when he sees this podcast.
Yeah.
I feel like you're speaking towards I guess it's just the length of time, because I don't think of these games as old games, but it's been a while. Like so Spelunky 1, I think it was like 2008 or something. When was Rogue Legacy? Was it 2012 or something?
It was 2013.
2013. Yeah. So we're all a lot grayer. Well, I am.
It has definitely been a while. I don't know.
Yeah. Let's go back even further then, because there's a bunch of ground to cover. When I was looking you guys up, obviously I'm a big fan of Rogue Legacy, and I was super excited to jump into the early access for Rogue Legacy 2, and FMF, as you referred to it as well, obviously was on everyone's radar a couple of years back. But I went to do some research, and I had absolutely no idea that you follow in the vein of a lot of sort of people that I love interviewing, right? Like folks who like Derek Yu, or like we recently had Ed McMillan on the channel for an interview. Folks who grew up in that same sort of era as me, with Flash games, with sites like Congregate and stuff like that. And I had no idea that you were so prolific on there. And then I went back looking at games and realized that I played a bunch of your games. Is that where you guys sort of cut your teeth, like making Flash games together? Was this when you guys were like at home together as kids, or like when did this all start?
We're a little bit older than that. When we were kids, but that was where we started. We Don't Shoot Your Pants was sort of our first foray into anything related to game development. Now, we had done a bunch of things in the past, like hobby stuff, but I don't think it was ever made public or anything. So that was all just for fun. But DSYP was our first like exposure to actual people who would give us response and feedback on the games. But we started that, I think, shortly when I entered the workforce. So I think it was my early 20s. And it was just on a whim. I was working at a job that I wasn't very happy with, and Teddy was. Where were you working, Teddy? Were you in game development at the time?
I think I was working
at GANs
for Webkins. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, and he just sent me an email with the idea. It was like a one-line joke. And, I started laughing in the office, and everyone was looking at me strange. And I was just like, I might as well try making this. It was such a small thing. And like at the time, I didn't have any programming. Like I'd taken some courses in like university of programming, but I hadn't really done anything full time or from start to finish. And I was like, this is a small project, and I really like it. So let's see where it takes us. And not expecting it to take us to where we are today.
That's awesome. So it was a just action script, like a couple different scenes Because it is like fairly rudimentary in that it's it's a text adventure. I guess.
Super basic.
For people who don't know, I guess I'll do the explaining on it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. Don't Shit Your Pants is effectively a game where you play as a gentleman who needs to go to the bathroom in pretty good, like 30 seconds or something, and you have to in the style of old sort of text adventure games get him to not shit his pants by it's like pull door, sit on toilet, shit, or something like that, right?
Yeah,
but then,
if you do that, you lose because you didn't take your pants off.
Oh yeah, because you forgot to take your pants off, right? Yeah, and then you sort of I feel it's funny because like you rolled into the sort of we're so used to achievements now in games for doing silly things, but that game was all about finding all the ways you could lose.
Right. Yeah.
What was it like when? Because like you made this game on a whim while you were stealing time from your employer. What was it like when this? Because from my perspective, this thing was huge. Like if I ask people about like Flash games from that era, and you mention "Don't Shit Your Pants," it's like, oh yeah, of course I played that. So that must have been weird when suddenly like was it millions of people were playing it?
A lot of people played it. I mean, I was still at work, so I just had like a tiny window open on the corner of my screen as I was reading like all these comments on Concrete. They have this like awesome comment system, and it was one of the best days of my life. It was a lot of fun just sitting there. I didn't get a lot of work done that day.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was definitely very cool, very surreal. Like we'd not get for the first thing that we'd exposed to the public to have such a positive reception was really great. But what really hit home for me was when our sister's coworkers would come to us and be like, "Oh, I played this game," and like hearing people on the internet is one thing, but meeting people in real life and then saying that they've actually tried it, that was like, wow, like okay, that actually does have some sort of some kind of influence, and that was really, really cool for me.
That's wild. How did you then, I guess, carry on from that moment? Was it learning more ActionScript, making more Flash games, going into rudimentary game making tools, or like did you guys know that this was a creative collaboration that you wanted to continue, or was it just still a hobby thing for a couple of years?
So I'm actually trying to remember. It's been so long.
It has been a while. Yeah, I'm really asking you to dig in the memory cards here.
I think after DSYP, we went to make CDG, right? Yeah. That's when we went for the Microsoft competition.
That's right. That's where I let it get to my head. So when I was doing that when I was making DSYP, I was only working on contract. So the contract ended and I wasn't doing anything. I was like, okay, well, now I can make something better. And I probably skipped too many steps because after DSYP, it was actually a fairly dark time. We tried to make something on the was it the original Xbox or the Xbox 360?
Xbox 360. It was a
Xbox 360.
They had a competition. Yeah,
it was an XNA. And this is a big jump from a text game in Flash to suddenly making something running on an Xbox 360 on an XNA. And multiplayer. Holy smokes! There was a competition called Dream Build Play, that Microsoft hosted, that encouraged people to use the XNA framework to make games, and we just jumped straight into that, and that was a little too much to handle. Like definitely a bigger bite than I could swallow.
They also gave you 8 months when they announced, and we found out 4 months after it was already announced. Yeah, so a really small window to make it.
But I'm young and foolish and naive, so I dived into it with the programming. We got some friends to help us, and although we did well, like we were an honorable mention in the competition.
Yeah, we got
ultimately top. I think it was top 20.
Or top 20.
Yeah, we didn't win anything, and so things sort of sputtered out, and so that was kind of disappointing. I mean, it's not the end of the world. It was like 4 months of work that pretty much went nowhere. Aside from the fact that I got to learn a bunch, right? So I think the only one who took something out of that was me, because I was learning programming at the time. All of the friends that we had already knew that kind of stuff, so they really didn't. They got the short end of the stick. And then, so that didn't go anywhere, so I decided to take a few steps back and started making iOS games.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah. And
nobody's played these. Sure.
You can't. We can't even play them if we wanted to. But,
right, yeah. That's such a shame. God, that's awful. You can play Don't Shit Your Pants, well, until the end of 2020 or something. And then
that's right. Once
Flash gets killed. God, that's awful.
But so we made two iOS games fairly early into the App Store creation process or whatever when it first came out. But even then it was like too late. Like we started it like I think a year after the App Store was released, and by then there was already 700 games being released on the store a day or something, and it was nuts. So we couldn't really separate ourselves from the pack in that regard.
Right.
And so I was like, okay, DSYP was a fluke. We were just very lucky with this. I went back to finding a regular job, and right before that job, we made one more Flash game just for the kicks. And we actually launched it on I don't remember which website.
We launched on
Newgrounds.
Newgrounds.
Yeah. We launched it on Newgrounds on the first day of my new job.
Oh, you're kidding! Which game was this?
This is my first quantum translocator.
Okay.
Yeah, we call it MFQT, and it did way better than expected. And so that was a really, I find it very ironic in a good way that we go back to Flash and then Flash rewards us. Like Flash was what got us started, and then I sort of betrayed it and left and tried to do something bigger, and then ultimately went back to Flash, met more success, and it was like now I was a Flasher for life. I love Flash, and I wasn't going to make games in anything other than Flash. But it was really bad for me because it was really successful on the first day of my new job. So the first day, all I could think about was quitting and making more games, which is really, really bad. I hope that didn't affect my work output. But so I left that job sooner than I should have.
Right.
And I went back into making games in Flash.
So why do you think it was then, right? Because obviously I've done the transition from ActionScript into C#, and it is a fairly massive jump. Even I had a little background in Java, but even then it was a lot. It was basically what stopped me doing any more programming. So and then obviously with iOS, it's not exactly simple either, like especially on a new platform. So what was it about ActionScript that sort of like unburdened you or something? Like sort of was it something that you were so comfortable with that it just let you focus on making the game part, or was there some other aspect of it?
Oh, for sure. ActionScript, I mean, on top of ActionScript, you also had the Flash interface or something, so that you could easily make graphics, you could easily make animations, and the two of them sort of played in concert so that you could make games really, really quickly. As far as
I'd also give kudos to the Congregate and Newgrounds website, which are just way better implemented than the iOS store.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, that's right. That's actually
you didn't have to pay money or fight tooth and nail to get.
You didn't need a publisher. You need to contact Microsoft
to get people to see your game. Right. Like everybody was very much more experimental. The audiences, right? So they're all always trying new things.
I love Flash. The whole platform, the whole package was there for you. There was ways to get your games exposed. There was ways to make the games very easily. And the ActionScript, I think, programming language was very user-friendly. So I think it's a fantastic learning tool for individuals. And it's like my heart is still with Flash, and it's always sad to see that these kinds of platforms are dying out and the technology is dying out. And it really sucks because I know that a lot of new game developers aren't going to get the opportunity that I was given.
Right. Even when you look at stuff like, the just playing devil's advocate, Unity and, access to non-traditional stores like itch.io or some whatever.
Right.
Like even still, I guess that discoverability isn't there that we had on those sites.
Yeah. I mean, you just go to a site and then you're just confronted with hundreds of games. You could just pick one and you just played it in your browser. You didn't need to install anything. All of these new platforms are fantastic, and they're definitely useful, but they weren't quite as accessible as what we had in the past.
Right.
Yeah. Also, Congregate is the only site which has an achievement system we cared about.
Oh yeah.
They put a lot of effort in. They would have all these daily and hourly and special things just to highlight developers and everything.
Right.
it's a pretty awesome site. I'm super sad that they're gone now.
Yeah.
Or they're closing.
So what was your experience during this period then, Teddy? Like you were working in game dev, is that right? And then every once in a while you'd have to sort of spend some time working on these projects together, or how was that working for you?
I would just work from I'd work at my job from 9 to 5 or 9 to 6, and then I would just whenever I went home, I just work on it with my brother. So like when MFGT and those things did successfully, I had a small window in the corner of my monitor again open, and I'd read the comments.
Wow.
Yeah, the exact same scenario every time we released those.
It was definitely harder for Teddy than it was for me.
Yeah,
he'd have to juggle both. After a long day of work, he'd come home and have to work some more.
But I wasn't saying that. I was saying in general. Sorry. But yeah, it was weird too because I wouldn't tell anybody at work or anything.
Of course, right?
It just felt weird. Yeah.
That you were doing your own stuff on the side. Yeah, I can understand that might feel odd. Did you enjoy the stuff with your brother more? Like, were you more bought into that, or was it sort of just a different vessel?
Yeah. Totally. All the places I worked at, I was always like, eh. I'm pretty I'm like when I work at a company or something, or at a game company, I would say I'm very easy to get along with, but when a project keeps stalling, which it happens a lot, right? There's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, I find, my patience just keeps wearing thin, and so I get frustrated after a couple of months, and then I start getting more abrasive.
Right. Is it easier to be that way with family? Yes.
All the barriers are down.
Yeah, and we also, which I think is super important, right? You need devil's advocates to make a good game. I usually played that role, which also put me into the
the hot seat.
Yeah, the hot seat a lot of the time, right? I got into quite a couple of meetings because of it, but I still think it was important. But with me and my brother, I think we understand that how that leads to a better product. So
yeah, it doesn't look like you're risk averse at all. Like if you go through the Rolodex of games you guys have made over the years, it's not exactly like you've been on the same drumbeat, right? It's different genres, different scales, different types of experiences, multiplayer, local. Like it really goes all around the place. Can we talk about then, I guess, to what is seemingly your breakthrough moment with Rogue Legacy? How did that sort of connect up to this? You're back in the world of Flash, you're having success again. How did you make that jump to, making an incredibly successful multi-platform game?
So we had, by the time we decided to work on Rogue Legacy 1, we had already released, I think, 5 or 6 Flash games. And to be honest with you, we would have loved to keep going. Like there was no reason to stop other than the fact that we quickly saw the writing on the wall. The competition was getting really, really fierce. Quality was going up. And we were like, well, this is... Like at this point, we might as well make a commercial game because it's getting so expensive and it's so time-consuming to make Flash games.
How are you earning money on the Flash stuff, by the way? Are they sponsored or is it ad rev or?
That's right. That's both. There's something called like Flash Game License where there was at the time. I don't know if it still exists, but basically sites could sort of bid on your games to get an exclusive license on their website, and then there's also that ad revenue stuff.
It's also an awesome website. Like it was so developer friendly.
Right.
Everything was developer friendly with Flash. That's why it was such a fantastic platform.
Who were the big sites then? It was congregated like Armor Games and Newgrounds.
Newgrounds, Max Games. There was, I don't know. There were quite a few
games. Yeah, there was quite a few.
Yeah. And it was fantastic if you ever got into a bidding war. Oh, that was the best feeling in the world.
Yeah, but you can't do or it's a lot. Harder to do for like console games, right?
Yeah.
But like
get Sony and Microsoft pulling.
It was completely like their whole website was designed so that it would lead to competition.
That's amazing.
For the developer side. Yeah, really cool site.
But so after we made those games, we decided like we should go big. like try our best, just make a Flash game, or not a Flash game, spend our time on a game that took longer than, I think at the time, the longest we'd ever developed on a game was like 4 months. And now this was something that we're going to commit more than a year to. So it was very scary, very, but the experience with Flash at least let us know that we could do it.
Right.
It was just, we were doing the same thing. We were just going to do it longer. So the only thing that was going to stop us was our own patience. So then we just went all in with Rogue Legacy.
Right. It's, considering it was essentially your first, mainstream, I don't know which way it traditional, it wasn't exactly traditional either, game, fantastically well executed. Didn't seem like it was overscoped, was in a genre that was just, it seemed like you hit it right at the right time. Like the roguelike games were sort of becoming more, again, mainstream, I don't know, or accepted with a broader gaming audience. And it just seemed to really hit the pitch perfectly. What was development like on it? Like, did you guys run into a bunch of problems with scope? Did you have trouble with any aspect of the game that you never didn't have with Flash? Like, what is your sort of like lingering memory of development on Rogue Legacy 1?
It was scary.
No, we definitely ran into those problems. Actually, remember, Rogue Legacy 1 was not originally a roguelike.
Right.
Yeah.
Like we were making like a Castlevania type game, and we were. I'd have to say that we were very very fortunate. Like I know we put a lot of work into it, and we put a lot of heart and resources into making Rogue Legacy 1. But I'm not going to deny that we were very fortunate, right? Like the opportunity was there. The Steam platform was fairly new.
Right.
Like you mentioned, roguelikes were sort of coming out with Splunky and Binding of Isaac, and so it was like it all came. All that we really did was we saw it and we took it.
We didn't even know about the roguelike genre. We just we weren't making a roguelike, but then we played Dungeons of Dreadmore, which had come out, right? And I was like, wow, this is fantastic. What a cool idea.
Yeah, we really enjoyed that game. And so we had, when we first started working on the game, I think like a month in, we were like, okay, this is already getting out of hand. Let's not make the same mistake we made with Band of Bears, and let's start down scoping. And not the first idea, but we eventually settled on roguelike because there's this idea that you generate X number of like rooms or art styles and it sort of reuses it. And so while that ultimately, I don't know if that actually made things cheaper for us in the end, that's what got us started. that folly of ours.
Yeah, that we pivoted. But we actually, designed it off of Dark Souls as well, right?
Right.
That's the economy system is like a twist on that, because in Dark Souls they don't want you to go for it, right? It's like, oh, you're going to be scared if you lose everything, right? We're like, well, we need to invert that, because roguelike, we want you to be, always exploring, and dying should be a reward for it, or dying should be rewarded. So that's when we came up with the economy flippy dippy thing.
Yeah, it's odd. It works in the game's favor in so many ways. And coming back to it, Rogue Legacy 2, which we'll talk about in a second, I almost had to like rewrite my brain a bit and go like, oh yeah, I remember this. Yeah, I this is a game that is like telling me to like go for it, like keep pushing, be dangerous, make the risks. Remember what your character's weaknesses are, all that sort of stuff. We had a bunch of questions from our patrons, and a lot of them were around the traits that the characters have. Obviously, one of the most unique aspects of Rogue Legacy being the fact that when you die, you play as a descendant of your character who has any matter of traits for combat and movement and stuff. But then also super interesting, novel, superfluous in many ways you could have thought, but like gameplay affecting personal traits. How did the idea for that come into play, to add these sort of like neat elements, like being colorblind and making the game black and white, or having any manner of different ailments as we so often do in life as well?
Well, the original design for traits was we knew the game was going to be like 5 minutes and not 30. And so we needed your characters to be different very early on compared to a standard roguelike where you keep growing. So we built the traits, but they were really lame. Like, they're super lame. +10 strength, +5 mana. Like, nobody cared. But then Kenny I think the first trait ever implemented into the game, like the first final trait, was colorblind, because he was just implementing effects to make the game prettier, and he implemented colorblind and he showed it off, and he was like, "This would be such a cool trait," right? And when I saw it, I was like, "Oh, this is the standard," right? And then the moment that became what the system was, we scrapped everything from before and then just started going in this new direction.
Yeah. It was mostly just testing it. It sort of like the reason why I like traits is because it was one of those ideas that happened organically. Like we had no plan for this ahead of time that was not documented in any way. It was just through testing and through our sort of agile development process. We were like, oh, this is actually kind of cool. How can we get it into the game?
So I guess when did you know you had your game, right? Because the agility that you're talking about, or your agile development process, led you to basically change genre, add in like one of the more fundamental elements of the game from a player's perspective in terms of its uniqueness. So how did you know when you were like, oh, this is it, we found it, like we're here now? Because that's so difficult with any project, but you know, especially with a game like this that's evolving, and the more time you spend on it, the better it seems to get.
I think generally, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Teddy, but generally we have an idea of how the game is going to play out from start to finish, like a very rough idea. And then we just start filling it in with stuff. And if we think that there's enough stuff in it, we're like, okay, we can stop filling it in. But to be honest with you, like even straight up to the last, to the release date, we don't really know, right? Like I know when we announced Rogue Legacy for the first time, people had some ideas that we thought were good, and so we wanted to add them. So like even then, even though it was so close to the end of development, we were still adding things.
Right.
And one other thing I like to, or we like to do is we like to stack problems, right? So we'll have all these things like the trait system. We know what it's the reason for it, right? And we know it's not good, or like not good in its current state. And we have all these other systems. And when you just keep stacking the problems, you'll eventually start seeing like matches where you can say, oh, if I put in this solution, it'll fix problems X, Y, and Z. And then that just, I think that really helps us, right? Because that helps make a cleaner game. Whereas if you're constantly trying to fix the problems as they come up one by one, then you're making like a one-to-one solution.
Right.
That just really bogs development down. We're doing the same thing for Rogue too. Like we've launched currently with bugs, or not bugs, but like issues, which we knew were issues, and we have new solutions, right? But like that's how we do it.
That's interesting. That requires a certain amount of bravery, I guess, to not immediately put your finger in the hole in the boat, but to sort of like let it breathe and
let the boat think of it. Yeah.
So did it feel like a success immediately once it came out? I feel like Rogue Legacy has come out on so many platforms, and I've played it so often over the years that I forget what the launch was like. But how was the launch for you guys?
Yeah, it was pretty fantastic. I mean, we had an idea of how it was going to turn out somewhat, because we announced the game on Steam Greenlight at the time. And it started like leapfrogging up the ranks to eventually get released, an approval for release on Steam. So we kind of had this idea that you know, we might have something special, but you don't want to count your chickens before they hatch. So we waited till the launch, and the launch was overwhelming to say the least. I mean, it's good and it's bad, because it's good because I mean everybody wants to do well and to see the success, and people love the game, always feels great. But at the same time, all of a sudden, like I'm dealing with tech support for hundreds and thousands of people, right? And so when if there's a bug that only occurs like 0.1% of the time, that's like 1,000 people that are sending bug reports. And so that was very, very overwhelming. And that admittedly, that dampened sort of the celebration. But, you know, I would rather have that than it fall into obscurity.
Right.
We also beat Company of Heroes for like one day. Which was super exciting. That's just really neat, because you know that was like way back when, right? And we're like, oh my goodness.
It was cool. It was cool for an indie game to go neck and neck with like a AAA title. That was to us very surprising.
Yeah, it was sort of they totally destroyed us later on, right? But it's still like, whoa, I'm gonna screenshot that.
Yeah, lots of screenshots of those kind of stuff. Yeah.
So what changed for you guys in terms of like Cellar Door then, right? Like how many people had their hand in Rogue Legacy, and did you guys scale up then to sort of get the game out on other platforms? How did that whole thing work?
Well, Rogue Legacy only had 5 people.
All right.
For its full development.
Wow.
So it was a very small team. And the biggest change from Rogue Legacy 1 to our next game, which was Full Metal Furies, was that it was no longer like a game-to-game development. So even though we made some money off of the Flash games, it was like enough to make the next game. And it was always like that up until the release of Rogue Legacy 1. And then all of a sudden, we had a much longer runway. There's goods and bad. There are pros and cons to that. You're no longer working under the knife, which can actually motivate you and inspire you to do things cheaply and efficiently. We no longer had that pressure. So, Full Metal Furies ended up taking almost 4 years to make as opposed to the 1.5 years for Rogue Legacy. And it's not because we took our time. It's just we were like playing around with ideas longer and that whole kind of thing, just because we could afford to.
Yeah.
In terms of like expanding the team, we definitely got larger. Not so much with our team. We just started hiring more contractors. So the team went up to I think at the largest point for Full Metal Furies was 15 people.
Okay. It's still very small.
But I guess so. Yeah, for us it was huge. It was 3 times larger than we'd ever been. But yes, I
thought it was 8 for FMF.
No, yeah, it was much larger.
You're including Blitworks, right?
No, not including Blitworks. Okay, 15 might be a little high, but it was around that number. Definitely higher than 8. Definitely past 10. But again, it was contract work, so it was like part-time stuff.
Right.
So as far as full-time work went, we didn't actually expand that much. So I don't think things changed too much for us.
Let's talk about Full Metal Furies then, because again, big shift. Was there a technology shift in there, genre-wise? So much going on there. What tell us about the direction of that game? Did you want to challenge yourselves in new ways? Was that a game idea you'd had for a long time, or did it develop sort of coming out of the success of Rogue Legacy?
We never have an idea when we make a game. It's pretty bad. We mainly go, we want to do this genre. Right. And then we go for it. So Rogue Legacy was like, let's do a Metroidvania before it pivoted. FMF was just an RPG brawler, right? Because we wanted to just see what we could do with that genre. And it exploded.
Yeah, it was. I think the biggest. So we didn't really go into it expecting there to be a very big technical change, because it was the same engine. Well, I mean, it was the same programming language, same technology, but we rewrote the engine, and plus we had all the experience from making Rogue Legacy 1. We thought FMF would be not a breeze, but easier than Rogue Legacy 1, and that was so far not the case.
Right. Yeah, multiplayer is really...
Yeah, the biggest hurdle for us was doing online multiplayer. And that was really, really, really difficult.
From like a technology perspective?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, and you know what? We're never going to do it again unless there's we have a professional in-house network programmer who knows his stuff, because we're not going to make that same mistake twice.
Yeah, it's way too hard. But it was a lot of fun to make. Personally, we got to do a lot of stuff that we always wanted to do, which was put in puzzles, hardcore puzzles, into these types of games and make an actual co-op campaign and things. I think FMF honestly does a lot of things, which will just be lost in the
lost in the shuffle
of time. Yeah,
but it's funny because when you go back to your Flash games, I Have One Day was one we didn't talk about yet, but you guys were making games with these puzzles and with this sort of all different characters, and there's some of that in Rogue Legacy for sure, but it was great to see a lot of that stuff in FMF sort of being I guess it feels like a creative muscle that perhaps you guys have that you didn't get to use on Rogue Legacy. Did you?
Yeah.
What's it?
For sure.
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say if you follow the track record of our Flash games, one of the things we do is we try to make a new genre. So we never work in the same genre twice, and every time we work on that genre, we try to add a twist to it. Right. So for I Have One Day, which is an adventure game, we added a time mechanic where you could actually rewind time. for Villainous, which was it was not a tower defense. It was a
reverse tower defense,
reverse tower defense. So rather than building towers, you were building the enemies that got through the towers. And then we made Bullet Odyssey, which was a shmup, but it's tied to the music.
Yeah,
and
really
so I think with FMF we kind of went down the same route, right? It's a brawler, but now we're throwing in a whole bunch of I don't know what you want. I mean, we say puzzle game, but it's not puzzle in the sense of like falling blocks or Tetris kind of puzzle.
Yeah,
like puzzle
not the mechanical ones.
Yeah, it's an adventure game puzzle kind of thing. And so we really like to see how two genres mix together. I guess that wasn't so prevalent in Rogue Legacy. And we went back to our roots.
Rogue Legacy was a roguelike with RPG mechanics, right? Like that was a big.
I mean, Dungeons of Dreadmore had RPG too, right?
No, permanent. Dungeons of Dreadmore.
Yeah, the permanence was for sure, definitely a little bit new, but it's not. It wasn't like taking two genres and like smushing them together.
Right, that like overt twist that you had.
Yeah.
So where does FMF lie then in the? Because it seems to have been like when you talk to people about it who play it, they enjoy it. It seems like it's sold well as well. But obviously, it's difficult to compare success against something like Rogue Legacy, right? Which seems like such a large success against, especially against the size of your team. So where does that lie for you guys in terms of like the 4 years that went into it and how it did?
So on the financial level, it didn't really meet our expectations. Unfortunately, it didn't, especially as you mentioned, when compared to Rogue Legacy 1. It was a bit of a disappointment in that regard. As far as like personal preference or how we feel about the game we made, I'm like super proud of it. I'm so Full Metal Furies is one of the few games that we've made that I wish I got to play instead of make. Because I think for us, it checks all the boxes that we wanted for this genre. And I'm really in love with the game, and I'm really, really proud of it. And I don't think, despite like the sales or even maybe some negative critical reviews, to me, it's been a while that I'm just like, it just bounces off of me now. Because I know what it is, and I know what it's, how it turned out, and I'm super proud of it.
Yeah. What about yourself, Teddy?
Same. Actually, one thing I'm super proud of, just a mini thing, is the game is 1 to 4, and I totally screwed up where I made single player way too hard. But the game has, I think it is, right? Because I do a bunch of research on all the other stuff when we're doing these things. And I think it has the most complicated adaptive system in any game ever made.
Right.
So it's scaling for the 1 player to 4 players, changes all of the arenas and everything, right? Automatically, which was like super cool, super crazy. It took a long time to make. And honestly, we could probably just tune some number, then it could, scale to 10 players if we want to do, which we don't. It can barely.
Yeah,
it's a little bit harder than that to get 10 players in that.
Yeah. But back in that networking code, you don't want to jump back in that one. Excellent. So, I mean, in many ways, I suppose that probably made the return to Rogue Legacy even more exciting, right? To have had that break from it, to have worked on such a different type of experience. Did you guys always know you were going to come back to do Rogue Legacy? Obviously, it's sort of like in a way, having that sort of like that recognition of the brand. It's in a way, it's a sort of a parachute game, right? If you need to financially or in terms of like building recognition, whatever, you can always go back to it, right?
Right.
Was it always something you thought you would go back to, or was it a reaction to what happened with FMF?
Yeah. So right from the beginning, we always knew we were going to make Rogue Legacy 2 after FMF. I mean, regardless of how FMF was going to perform. However, sorry, go ahead.
But we actually had, if FMF did amazing, we go straight to FMF 2 because we had a great idea. Remember? We
had a great idea, but I don't think we were going to follow up with it because, the biggest reason why we didn't follow up from Rogue Legacy 1 straight to Rogue Legacy 2 is because we were completely burned out.
Right.
And if we did make Rogue Legacy 2, I don't think it would be nearly what it is today. And so we were like, it definitely makes sense to take that break first. Now that break was only supposed to be like 2 years, it ended up being 4, so much longer than we'd anticipated. But yeah, regardless of the performance of FMF, Rogue Legacy 2 was going to be made. So it's unfortunate that we've read online sometimes we've read some people saying like, oh, FMF didn't do so well, and that's why they're doing Rogue Legacy 2 as a cash grab.
Right.
And we're like, well, that's not really the case, because that's what we've been planning since the beginning.
Yeah, how dare you make a sequel to your game like eight years later, or like 7 years later. So I guess let's talk about the reason to go early access then as well, because we've been covering the development of Hades with the folks over at Supergiant, and we have given us lots of information about that process and how useful it's been, how having like a smaller pool of players for a lot of the types of minute feedback you need was really useful, how sort of it's helping them make the best version of their game based on that sort of iteration. Where did the decision for that come from you guys? Obviously you had experience with stuff like Steam Greenlight and that type of community feedback in some ways, but developing a game, especially if you're doing it in that agile way where you're happy with there being rough edges in it, it's like scary in early access, right? So how did you come to that decision?
I think for us, we were juggling the idea of early access for a very, very long time. Actually, even before we announced Rogue Legacy 2, there was like a Steam thread about should our next game be early access or not. I think we ultimately decided near the end that it was a good idea to go into early access, because I think Rogue Legacy just lends itself very well to it. The idea of there's new traits that we can get ideas for, there's new abilities, there's new I guess relics and heirlooms which didn't exist at the time, or at least people weren't aware of, and this also lends itself to the idea that when we were in Greenlight, like you mentioned, we did get some great feedback from people.
Right.
And we implemented it into the game, and we're like, well, can we expand on that? Can we take that and bring it into Rogue Legacy 2? Would this make it a better game? And plus, with the long development time of FMF, we were really turned off by the idea of just working on something for X number of years and just showing it to people whether they like it or not.
Right.
And then that's it. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, well, then it falls by the wayside. There's lots of decisions, I think. So if you have any input on that, Teddy.
Yeah, it also really helps with the balancing, because our games are usually balanced way too hard.
And I think we're taking full advantage of it. Like I know the next content patch for Rogue Legacy, which is actually going to be our first content patch technically, is coming out in a couple weeks. We've already been tweaking like a lot of the balancing stuff based off of not just the balance of numbers, but like, okay, well, this character doesn't play well, and we see how people play that character. How are we going to change that character so that he plays better? That's more than just, he deals more damage or he takes less damage or whatever, which we wouldn't really have the control over for a game that we already launched.
Right.
You can't make those big sweeping changes because the game's out and it's done, and you alienate people if you made those changes.
Right. How do you pull that feedback then as well? Because that's one of the issues that we talked to Amir and Greg about, that they had difficulty in trying to find the wheat from the chaff in a way. Do you have like heuristics working on the back end? Is it just a lot of community engagement on forums? Like, how does it work?
We're still building it up. So we've only released like a month ago. So we're still getting the system in. Right now, it is mostly just feedback from people like Discord or through an email system or through the in-game system that people can't seem to access. But it's a learning process for us. So we don't really have anything we've settled on just yet. We've actually spoken to the Supergiant guys a few times about their experiences with Hades and trying to take that learning process that they have and try to apply it to our game, and we'll see what fits.
Yeah, it's cool to have a sort of a similar ally, I guess, in the early access roguelike world.
They've been super helpful. They've been really great.
That's awesome. I want to talk about Rogue Legacy 2 now, right? Because I jumped in, like you said, it's in early access, let's say. You guys have only just come out, and obviously, like you said, your first content update is going to come in the next little while. But it was fun playing a bunch of it and then going back and playing Rogue Legacy and just feeling out the gulf of difference, because like there's so much going on. The just from the way levels work, instead of it being that sort of like box grid where you exit and then you enter the next one, the levels themselves move, like the camera is free moving, the animation is like, and the effects, like, so the fire, all that sort of stuff, is like, I keep getting killed because I'm just looking at shit because it looks pretty. Like I've had to stop myself. I'm just like, man, that skull really, like, I love how it like moves around. Tell us about, I guess, what were some of the top line things that you guys wanted to do? Obviously, like, new graphics is something that just sort of happens when you're recreating a game, but just fundamentally in terms of like systemic stuff, or systems rather, what were some of the things that you wanted to do with this game that you sort of didn't do with the first Rogue Legacy?
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, the first one is to really differentiate the classes, right?
Yeah,
so
say the same thing.
Yeah, we have 4 classes released now, but we've got so many more, and some of them get really wacky, which I'm super happy with. Wacky might sound bad, but wacky, I think it's cool because it's
interesting.
Yeah, it lets us kind of both flex our creative muscles and also like show what the game is capable of in terms of like the combat system. We always wanted to implement the universal healthcare. That's funny. We dabbled in it for Rogue Legacy 1. So in the console version, you get 30% more gold for Vertigo, right? But that was like, our system doesn't support it, so we just like, hamstrung it in. Yeah. And then this one we're like, okay, well, we can do it proper, and we really wanted to do that because we agree. Like the system wasn't fully up to par. It still had issues, but we had to launch, and I'm really happy with the reception for that.
Could you explain what that is, just for people who mightn't have played it yet?
So in Rogue Legacy 2, your characters have certain traits like colorblind, or they might have like dwarfism or gigantism. And before, in the first game, you just play as them and you'd be like, oh, okay, this game is down, 20% harder. But now we say, oh, if you play with this and you have universal healthcare, then they'll be given like a 20% gold bonus for playing as them. So now you're encouraged to be like, oh, I'm going to take this character and I'm going to go and try and get more gold with them, right? Or I'm going to try and beat the boss and I'll get a way bigger reward for it. So that was exciting. And also, like, when we put it in, we went like, oh, what can we do with it? And we put in Osteogenesis Imperfecta, which is you have one hit and you get like 250% more gold, which is just awesome because now you're just taking this whole run as its own unique thing, which is really cool.
But that was one of the benefits that we weren't anticipating. By adding these gold modifiers, we could go crazy with some of the traits.
Right.
Because like we couldn't add the one Teddy just mentioned if you didn't get any reward for it. People would just definitely avoid it. Why would you ever play the game in that fashion? But now that we had a way to balance it, encourage people to play it, we can go. We're sort of not as restrained in what we cannot do with the traits.
Right, and it's also like a sort of a good palate cleanser run, Like what I love about that is then being able to just kind of go, all right, for this one, I'm just going to focus on gold, or because like that's how I think a lot of, at least myself, that's how I approach a lot of these games. We're like, okay, this is like a discovery run. Okay, this is like me learning how to use this class, But
yeah, that's a good point. I never really considered that, but and that happens sort of subconsciously. When I play it and I run into that trait, I'm like, okay, I can't do anything with this trait. Yeah, you're right. I'm sort of forced to use gold to find gold, but that's a nice change of pace from what I was trying to do earlier.
Right.
Yeah, I never really considered that.
The graphics as well. Let's talk about it a little bit, because it just pops off the screen. Like it's hard to make 2D games look like, I don't know, innovative or interesting. Maybe this is just old fuddy-duddy who's been playing these games for so long, but and we've had such an incredible 10 years of 2D games, indie games with like different art styles, just all over the place, from super minimalist stuff, sword and sorcery, to like, classical throwback stuff like you guys have had Rogue Legacy, and like zany stuff like Hotline Miami. But it is kind of hard to like break new ground. It is interesting that you mentioned that the artist for this was somebody who worked on Lovers in a Dangerous Space-Time, which is another game that just like
very visually different.
Oh, yeah,
for sure.
You just want to look at it all day. You want that screensaver. Remember screensavers? I've just realized I haven't had a screensaver forever.
I have the thing where my computer turns off. My monitor turns off.
Yeah, energy saving.
Yeah.
We can't have our flying toasters anymore.
Exactly. For the graphics to the game, you can actually follow a very clear line of thought that led it to where it is today. It actually starts with what Teddy mentioned earlier, which was the different classes. So in Rogue Legacy 1, there were different classes, but they were all the same character with a beard or something. But he all had the same sword, he had the same attacks. And we knew early on with Rogue Legacy 2, actually one of the first things we wanted to do with Rogue Legacy 2 was have different classes with different weapons, which meant different animations. And where our previous system just would not support that, it would mean that the 2D artist would have to draw everything by hand, draw new pieces of equipment for every single animation set. So that ultimately led us to 3D. And then 3D led us to Unity. And then Unity led us to we want to maintain the 2D art style. So it led us to stepping animations so that, games like Dragon Ball Z Fighter or movies like Spider-Verse, Into the Spider-Verse, all use stepping animation. Right. So we borrowed from them, added that, and it ultimately ended up, I'm sure there's more to it than that, but the cliff notes to that is it ended up in that fashion, all sort of intentionally. Whether it would work or not, we didn't really know, right? It was just a lot of testing to see how it would turn out. Right. And it was very scary because when we first released the trailer to the game, or at least a little teaser to the game, there was a lot of sort of pushback from the community because a lot of the community loved the original pixel art, and they only saw static images of the game. Right. But when you see it in motion, it's very different from seeing it in those static images. And we were very confident that it maintained even though it was no longer pixel art, it did maintain the sort of essence of what Rogue Legacy 1 was.
And when you saw that static art, a lot of people were like, "Oh no, it's going to be one of those tweened animation games, right?"
Yeah, Flash.
Getting back to your Flash roots, yeah, totally.
Yeah, that's right.
That's amazing.
It all comes back.
Yeah. So I guess just to chat about that animation then, because when you watch it, the thing that stands out for me, who's a layman who doesn't understand a lot about animation, is there's a lot of frames in this. This must have taken ages. So what is it? Is it interpolating frames? Is that what that system is doing?
We're hand animating every frame, right?
Yeah, he is hand animating every frame. Oh. So generally, when you do animations in 3D, you set up keyframes, and then it interpolates from one point to the next. So we do the same thing. We just remove the interpolation and add a whole Yeah, but the advantage to it is that if you wanted to say switch a piece of equipment, switch your weapon, you just change the rig so now there's a different weapon in his hand, and you can use the same animation sets or whatever. So yeah, that's why we switched from 2D to 3D, because I think for us to do what we wanted to do is absolutely essential.
That's incredible. Okay, yeah. Does that also mean that you can sort of do you can keep updating those assets individually? You could replace the look of an arm, and it means you don't have to do the entire animation again. We can just, you have to redo the animation, but you don't have to pixel draw every single
Yeah, absolutely. That it's a huge advantage, particularly with the equipment. Now we can just, because that doesn't require new animation. We just swap out the material, looks like something else, or we swap out the geometry and it sticks to the same animation rig, and we don't have to do any more work on it.
Awesome. I've got a couple more questions and then I'll let you guys go because I know you got a big content update to work on. The other thing, and I'm really sorry, this keeps happening. I'm sure when you do interviews with people bring up other roguelikes, but it is also the same week that Spelunky 2 came out, so it's on top of mind. I don't know what's happening. I think, and I'm very interested to talk to you about this, because I'm finding Rogue Legacy 2 harder than I found Rogue Legacy 1, right? And I'm also finding Spelunky 2 harder than I found Spelunky 1. And it's really interesting because, of course, in many ways it should be, right? Because I have now been playing these games for, maybe the best part of a decade, right? Roguelike games that I'd never experienced before. I've now since played games like Dark Souls and Bloodborne, and so combat, I'm a bit more attuned to not just, flying through games like I probably was prior to those experiences. But it is interesting that it's when you go into play one of these games, it's a sequel to one that you've sort of mastered. It's difficult to be at a spot where you're it's harder than I was experiencing. What's that like from your side, right? Are you leaning harder because that's what players need? Are you leaning harder because it's in early access and you're able to sort of find the sweet spot back or forward from there? What is your guys' experience with that? Or do you not find it harder and I'm just shit at games?
No. So actually, when you brought up Dark Souls and Bloodborne, that was a really good because that's actually how we base our difficulty. Did you play Dark Souls 2?
I'm still playing through Dark Souls 1 remastered. I've Bloodborne and Sekiro are the ones I've done most of.
Right. So when Dark Souls 1 came out, amazing game, everybody played it. Then Dark Souls 2 was released, and what they did was they're like, okay, everybody beat Dark Souls 1, so Dark Souls 2 is just gonna raise the difficulty by 10 times, right? And it was too hard for me. I had a lot of trouble with that game. But then their other team released Bloodborne, which was like easier than Dark Souls, but I found it even harder, or easier than Dark Souls 2, but I found it harder because even though it's kind of the same game, you've got new mechanics, you've got new enemies, you've got a new cadence to the game, which made it like harder and more interesting. And that's what we wanted to do with Rogue Legacy. So when we were releasing the characters, we were like, when you're picking these characters and you're learning them, it doesn't matter how much you played Rogue Legacy. When all of these characters are going to put a twist on how you play, right? You're more or less, everybody's starting from square one. So the numbers for the enemies and everything are actually very close to what Rogue Legacy 1's numbers was. It's just that all these new characters screw it all up. Yeah.
I like it. Yeah. So it's not that the numbers are higher. It's that the muscle memory that I've developed doesn't apply, and I have to sort of I have to get back. Yeah. It's like I know karate, but I need to know judo to like be good at this one. That's awesome. What's the feedback been like then over the past? It's very early days, obviously. But what's the feedback been like? And like you said, is it interesting are you getting a lot of feedback on stuff that you're kind of like, yeah, we know we need to do that. And is that also useful because it means that you're in step with your community? Like what's that process of hearing feedback been like?
Well, one thing, and this is really bad on my part, is before we released, we nerfed the difficulty significantly, like the amount of grinding and everything. And we got hit by a lot of people saying there's not enough content.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And we talked to people, and they're like, you should definitely make your game harder in the beginning so that, the early access content is stretched out. And I don't know why I changed it last minute, but I did. And it's bit us in the butt. I mean, we've spoken to people, and they said it's what we have is like a good problem where the number one complaint is there's not enough content.
Yeah.
Right. But like, we know we can fix that. But if the number one complaint was like, oh, the game sucks, right, then we'd be in a way more heap of trouble.
Yeah.
So, good and sad. I don't know.
Yeah, Teddy's right. The reception for the actual content that is in there has been very positive, and that really encourages us and motivates us to do better for the next content patch. Like, we really don't want to make that same mistake. We're really trying our hardest to add all this really great stuff. And as Teddy mentioned, the fact that people are saying the problem is there's not enough content means they want more content, means they want to keep playing this game. So we're keeping that as our motivation to keep going and not give up or not fall into a depression, I guess.
Well,
so it's okay. It's like there's goods and bads to it, right?
Yeah.
We wish we would release a little bit stronger, but at the same time, we don't think it's a problem that we can't correct.
Right. It's an interesting problem to have because you're effectively selling to your most diehard players when you do an early access thing, right? Like the people who are really willing to make that jump and to kind of be invested and are probably better than the average player as well, right?
That's right. Yeah. So that's also something we didn't really consider when we launched it. That's like we had a few play tests with people prior to actually launching, but we didn't have anybody like truly fantastic at the game or really, really hardcore to try it and blow through the content within an hour or something. So we didn't realize that was going to be an issue.
Right. It's a learning process, the early access world. I got one or two questions from our patrons that I want to squeeze in here as well. Grid asks, can you wink if there are any Full Metal Furies references in Rogue Legacy 2?
That's a blink, Daddy.
Two eyes is a blink. Okay, so okay. Well, there's
two references.
And there's one here from Gaza. Can you talk about how you discovered, vetted, and implemented some of the traits for Rogue Legacy 2? So obviously you've had that experience of the first game of sort of like coming across it and then adding them. How do you then? Is there like no-go areas? Is there stuff that like oh, that's like that's going to like mess with the system too much? Or has the sort of the economy allowed you to open that up even more than you could in the first game?
I think sorry, go ahead.
You got it.
Well, I was going to say there's always multiple things that make us determine it. One of them being if it's too complicated to do, we won't do it. Unless it's really, really cool. Right? If the coolness level exceeds the difficulty of implementation level, we're going to implement it anyway. But there's also like political things we got to talk about, right? Like we have to consider when we want to implement a trait, because that there's always some gray area for stuff, and there's some that are just unnecessarily offensive, and they're like, okay, no point on adding that. That's just gonna upset some people.
Yeah, I guess we're
never punching down.
Right.
Sorry? We're never trying to punch down. But we do know that it's
it can be interpreted that way though.
Yeah, we have to be super careful with interpretation, and there's more people on the team, right? So even if there's something like possibly that can be taken in a very wrong direction, it makes it difficult. We've spent a lot more time just talking about these kind of things, right? Because it's not our intent. It's not our intent.
But with Rogue Legacy 1, it was just two of us, and we just did it for better or for worse, and dealt with the blowback.
Right.
But because there are more people who have their name attached to this, we have to tiptoe. Not tiptoe. We just have to be more considerate.
Right. Yeah. Because you're working in the world of stereotype, which it rubs up very closely to that whole problem of punching down. Has there been any traits that sort of probably won't make the transition to the sequel that were in the first game?
I mean, we added the gay trait in the first game because like we knew there'd be a backlash, but it doesn't do anything, right? It was just like our way of like
adding representation.
Giving a nod to the community. And then when it came to this one, we wanted to expand the representation, but
we haven't. We'll just say we haven't come up with
so difficult. Yeah. We don't want to offend anybody. And it's honestly, I think we've spent. It is the most expensive trait in the game now, even though it doesn't do anything.
Right.
Right. Just the amount of time that we've spent talking about it. It's there. There's like 17 or so versions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just because it's not something that you can please everybody, I think.
Well, it's also because the landscape has changed from 2013.
Yeah.
Right, totally.
And
so we have to make sure that we are up to date with what has changed.
Yeah, and the hardest part is like I'm saying is and it's a very valid argument, which is not showing them in a way is singling them out.
Right. Okay.
Like so, it's like to not represent them would be the best way to represent them, but then there's the history from Rogue Legacy 1, and
we get people
who want it.
Emails say, "Why am I not being represented in this?"
Right.
Right. And there's two sides with completely different perspectives on this, and we don't know how to sort of reconcile those two.
Was this was this because you talked over a little bit at the start? Was this race or was this gender?
Sexual orientation and gender identity. But it's just tough. It's tough. We really, really don't want to misrepresent.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So
yeah, it's like by having a game, a systemic game requires categorization in a area of life that sometimes categorization is helpful and sometimes it's the opposite of what people want. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So
it's a different.
We're gonna have to make it stand somewhere.
Yeah, that's a difficult. But it's cool that you're giving it so much thought as well. And the wonders of early access mean that I'm sure you'll have lots of feedback and have been already. I suspect as well. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. People can pick up Rogue Legacy 2 on Steam early access. I believe it is $19.99 here in the United States. Is it similar in the Great White North?
Yeah, I think it's like $21.99 Canadian or something.
Yeah,
excellent.
Steam has this automated thingy which does it for us. We don't have.
We don't know what the price.
Yeah, you don't have to be like like currency brokers as well. Well, you've got. It sounds like you both have enough work. Thank you so much. The next content update is coming as of recording.
Late October.
Late October. Okay.
Oh.
Yes.
So check that out. while instead of going trick-or-treating, because that's probably not going to happen.
This is fun, I'm telling you. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much. It'd be great to check in again in a couple of months and see how you guys are doing if you're down. That'd be fun.
Awesome. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks so much. And thank you for watching or listening to the podcast. You can follow us at Noclip Video on all the social media hellscapes. Patreon.com/Noclip if you want to support the show. And we'll see you again next week. Take care.